another adventure in Australian literature. So I have an interesting book for you. It's actually one I've been wanting to bring for a while, but I thought after the book Otterline brought last week, as well as looking at some things that I've seen online people discussing, I thought, I think now is the time to bring this. But before we start, remember, we don't have sponsorship, and we don't have Patreon, and we don't have ads. So if you want to support us, there is our shop where we have books and writing services. There is also our Redbubble shop, which has over 100 designs, and if you want to support us, you can support us that way. If you don't want to spend any money, absolutely fine. Like, comment, share these videos. That really, really helps us. So on we go. So what is the book I've been wanting to bring you? It is Linda Jaivin's Eat Me from 1995. Linda Jaivin is an American-born Australian author. She is an academic. She is an expert in China. She is a translator, and she is also a novelist. Now, this book, it looks very Sex and the City. It looks very Sex and the City, but it actually predates Sex in the City. So there's something for you. I'm not sure whether Linda Jaivin had read the columns, but this is a book set in Sydney, and it's about 4 female friends. There is Julia, the photographer, Chantel, who's the editor of a fashion magazine. Helen is an academic at the university. I'm guessing University of Sydney, because she works in the city. That's the big university in the city, is Sydney University. And Philippa, who's a writer. And these 4 women are friends. They get together, they meet, they share aspects of their lives, and they talk about sex. They talk about their sex lives, they talk about their fantasies. Philippa is writing an erotic novel. The first chapter of this, if you can make it through the first chapter of this book is for you. If you read this first chapter and you think, oh my God, what did she do with that fig? I'd say stop there. I'd stop there at that point and not bother with this. Like, it is a book about sex. It's an erotic novel. Now, is this just an erotic novel? No, it's not. But I don't just bring something that's just, oh, this is pornography. No, it doesn't have much in the way of a plot. It's a bunch of interconnected fantasies. The erotic element of it, the sexual element, is the point of the novel. But at the same time, it is more interesting than just that. What it does is, through centering women, it is examining, well, what does sex mediated by and for women actually look like? How does that manifest in a way that is different to erotica or sexually explicit things written by and for men? So while it is at the same time creating this female gaze, this idea of, well, what is it that women are enjoying? It is also interrogating, well, how does this work? How do the politics of this work? Is creating feminist erotica any different to creating the erotica that is written by men? Is it just a case of flipping around the point of view? Or what does that do to the politics of it? What does it do to the concept of agency if it is women who have the agency? If it is men who are the desired rather than the desiring? What does that do? What does it say about women to actively say, hey, women have desires and fantasies, and that they look different to male desires and fantasies, but they're perfectly valid. This book is really interesting because it is so early. So it is a book that has been written for women's consumption. It is not written for a male consumption, and that comes out very clearly through the point of view. But it's also a book that is coming ahead of the curve. It's right ahead of the curve. As I said, this comes before Sex and the City. And Sex and the City is a lot less playful than this. There is a lot of playfulness, a lot of exaggeration, a lot of fun, a lot of humor in this book. And so this is ahead of the curve in terms of it's ahead of Sex and the City, and it's also ahead of the big whole Twilight, 50 Shades of Grey, and all of the what gets called on Instagram spicy content, all the fairies and the really kind of, we'll get to that, it really kind of patriarchal spicy content that people talk about across social media, the very dominating stuff. One of the things that really is striking about this is the equality of it. In order to, it is really interesting looking at the distinctly different power dynamics of male written erotica than female written erotica. In these, their partners are as much they're not, it's not romantic as in romance, as in that, and as in soft and fluffy. This is very much a book about sex and erotica, but these are partners where it is very clearly a loving relationship, or a relationship where one is not dominated by the other, where the encounters are not coercive. And that's really important because when you compare it to what has come afterwards. So this is a really interesting sort of book. The other thing I wanted to talk about before I start talking about some of the comparing it to some of the more modern stuff is this is 1995. This has a Sydney that doesn't exist anymore. This is a Sydney where artists and creatives can live in the inner city. That whole place that's gone. That doesn't exist anymore. They've been priced out of the inner city. The people fled out of the inner city and have moved other places. It's the inner city is no longer a place where you have the kinds of creative world that you see in this book. A lot of that has left the city in the 30 years since this came out. There is a big change. The inner city used to be cheap. I mean, even in the 90s, it wasn't that cheap, but it was cheap compared to what it is now. Now, you can't, it's not a renting city. It's a place where people have, it's gentrified. It's very gentrified. It's a very, very gentrified place, the inner city, because those are the places that are close to the very high paid jobs. So when you look at this, you get a glimpse of a part of the city that no longer exists. It's a glimpse of the city that I lived in about 25 years ago. So I really, really noticed that when I read this book is, that city where writers can be living in the city and not necessarily being, the Patrick Whites, the very moneyed, very Centennial Park Patrick White, but actual writers who are still breaking in has gone. And I think that the city loses something. Any city which prices the creatives out of it loses something of its character. But you do get that really vibrant city life in this book, which is a really interesting thing to see. Now, talking about this in relation to why I wanted to have a look at this in relation to a lot of the stuff that has been published subsequently. So after 50 Shades of Grey, and publishing and writers discovered, oh wow, there's money to be made in erotica directed at women. This stuff started to really flood into the market. A lot of it not very good. A lot of it very, very, very much imitating the dominating, patriarchal, dominant, subservient, male dominant, female subservient dynamic that you see in the very bad bondage of 50 Shades of Grey, which is not a fair representative of bondage. So I'm just going to say that straight off, so people who are into the BDSM, that's not what BDSM looks like. I think this has some better representation of that, with that thing that is done with that fig. Anyway, but after that became popular, a lot of people use that as a blueprint to write their own stuff. And a lot of that stuff has replicated a lot of bad politics. Yes, it is sexually explicit, but it's not very good. It's not very good for all the women writing it. It's not actually very female focused. And I part of what made me think about this was it made me think a lot of these writers have not read Angela Carter's Sadie and Women. And I know that a lot of people have not read the Sadie and Women. There's a video, Janice did a video on that a couple of years back. Angela Carter's The Sadie and Women really examines the two options of female sexuality under a patriarchal system. it's either the innocent who gets brutalized, or the dominant libertine who is basically masculinized and turned into an oppressor. And in that, Angela Carter talks about the need for, well, what do women actually like? What do women actually want? How could you actually start talking about this in a way that is female-centric? And I am very aware that I am talking about this mainly in terms of heterosexual relationships, because that is where this dynamic is on the whole played out. And I'm not a reader of LGBTQAI plus erotica, so that's not my position. I am talking about heterosexual sexual dynamics in this. So Angela Carter is talking about, well, what does it look like when women define this for themselves instead of being defined by patriarchal norms? And I think Linda Jaivin answers that. She answers what it can look like if you ask women, what do you actually want? Not what have you been told you want? Are you following a market to look for? She is asking, actually, what do you like? What do you like? And what women, when actually asked, not when presented with, oh, well, this'll do, which I think a lot of the stuff that is coming out is taken up with, oh, well, this'll do, because some of the stuff I've heard about is particularly ick. Like, it's just being held captive, blah, 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 blah. Subordination, and oh, I can fix him. All very Beauty and the Beast type of things. But then again, Beauty and the Beast has its origins in French courtship, where young convent girls are married off at 16, having come from an all-female environment, and are then sent by their families to a strange man's house, and you're married to this guy now. And Beauty and the Beast is literally about coming to terms with living with a man who might be, or who definitely was older than you, who you had very little in common with, and you had to learn to accommodate. That's not a woman's fantasy. That's highly, highly patriarchal. Here is how you deal with a very rigidly patriarchal structure. Here is how you placate the beast so it's nice to you. That's not women-centered. That's just telling the old story from a woman's perspective. But that's not saying, what would you actually like? I think one of the things that makes this actually work is the fact that Linda Jaivin wrote this as a mature woman. Not as a teenager, not as a inexperienced girl, but as a mature woman. And her characters are mature women. They're in their late 20s, their 30s, even their 40s. They are mature women. Women who know what they want, who own what they want, and crucially have social, political, and economic power to not need to have that, I need to placate this man because he's rich and he has things that, and I won't survive without it. they're surviving, they're thriving without that. What they want men for is companionship and sex. And that is a really important element of this. And I think that that is something that Angela Carter is talking about, that when you equalize the ground, between men and women, what then do women want out of that? And a lot of what is coming out that's called spicy content, a lot of it looking with covers that look fairly like YA fiction, which is its whole other thing, and with some self-published authors who have taken things to such a degree that there was that one who got arrested by the New South Wales Police for her content. That one can start to think, I don't think you have a grasp of your own wishes and desires. You are replicating a very patriarchal view of sex, and then you are putting it out there. There has been a lot of talk, in fact, about some of this, some of these books being a form of conservative recruitment. If there are red pills for men, there are spicy romance books for women, spicy romance books and tradwives. But if you would like some content that is not converting you to far-right politics, this one is entirely safe. They're not work safe, if you know what I mean. As I said, the first chapter will determine whether or not this book is for you, and you can probably read that as a sample. When you read it, there's no way I'm reading that out loud. You could probably read that as a sample. All of the relationships in the book are consensual. All of them are between people who are reasonably equalized in power. I won't tell you the end, but the actual end of the book, sort of, it is a book that is about the writing of this as much as it is about the consumption of this and the creation of this. It gets quite meta at some points. You are frequently reminded that you are reading. You are frequently reminded that these are stories that characters are telling, and you are very much reminded that of the construction of these and the humor in them. There is an exaggeration that makes them funny. It is a level of exaggeration that keeps the whole thing running along in a very light and frothy manner, which is the kind of thing that you want. I personally don't understand how people read books about subordination and being treated very, very badly, because that's not sexy. Like, it's just not something that I personally would find that way. But yeah, Eat Me by Linda Jaivin is a book very much about the power of women and women's sexuality, and it is an interesting counterpoint to last week's book, which was about a naive girl thinking she knew how to use sex, whereas this book is a book of mature women using their sexuality for theirs and their partner's pleasure, which is a very different form of power. It is a very different form of power, and it is a very interesting form of power that that is definitely worth a look. This is chick lit before chick lit was a thing. It is Sex in the City before Sex in the City. It's Sex in Sydney. And it is a woman writing from a woman's perspective, making an attempt to subvert and to highlight and to underline the patriarchal norms of how we have talked about sex for centuries. So that is Eat Me. It's not going to be for everybody, but it is very fun. It is very bold, and yeah, it is well worth picking up and having a look at. I'm not going to say you're going to like it, guaranteed, but if it interests you, check it out. Linda Jaivin, Eat Me. And I will be back with another book sometime later. So until then, bye-bye. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.